Hello, everyone. This is the third episode of our roundtable discussions. Here tonight, we have 5 club players that have accepted the invitation to talk about the player of color in Quidditch. The guests share their experiences and explain what they believe teams should be doing to create a welcoming team. This roundtable discussion is for education and to learn about experiences that these guests have faced in this community. The goal is to listen and to learn and to hopefully use this platform to create change in this community. And now we would like the guests to introduce themselves.
Hey guys, I'm Izzy, and I've been playing Quidditch since fall 2012, so that's 8 years now. Started on the Penn Pygmy Puffs, and which was unofficial, and then went on to the Philadelphia Honey Badgers for a couple seasons, and then went to New York to play on the Rogues for one season, and then this past season was on Philadelphia Freedom.
Cool. Hi, everyone. My name's Ethan. I started off at the University of Rochester in 2015. I was captain from 2017 to 2019. That sounds right, yeah. And then I went on to coach Texas Hill Country Heat after that. And I'm now the coach of Soldados and the editor-in-chief of AVEN.
Hey y'all, my name is Kreger. My first ever season competitively was the 2014-2015 season. I played on Wizards of Westwood. Then since then, never actually played on any team for 2 years in a row. So I went from Wizards of Westwood to UCLA, to Gambits, to UCLA, to Gambits, to Diablos last season, and hopefully if the season happens this year, Lost Boys. Yeah, and I've just been SoCal based the entire time.
My name is Quincy. I've been playing since 2015. I played 1 year with Tribe Quidditch in Arkansas, and then moved down to Atlanta. Did 1 year with Florida Finest, and then after that started Terminus Quidditch. Currently the coach captain of the team over most of the leadership. Yeah, so hopefully team continues and we keep going for the next few years.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bassam. I started Quidditch in 2014, the fall of 2014 at the U of R. Played there for 4 years. Graduated and played for Bosnia for the past 2 seasons. And then in the middle of that was playing MLQ, Rochester Whiteout Quidditch. I coached a year of Whiteout and was assistant coach / coach for about a year and a half at U of R. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming on tonight. So I guess the first question that I have for all of you is the same question that's been asked the last 2 roundtables, where when you first started playing Quidditch, when you started telling your family, your friends, how did those reactions go about? Did you have any maybe like negative feedback? Did people just clown you? Like, what were those reactions like?
So for me, my parents weren't exactly too happy that I would be playing a full contact sport. Only they did not know it was full contact to begin with. Like at Penn, we did try to tackle, but it was not to the level of official Quidditch, and it was fine. But I think once my dad saw me at one practice, he was really shocked at how physical it was. And since then, they've been actively trying to get me to quit, which sort of happened with getting a concussion last November. So I immediately retired after that, but then coronavirus hit, so I have all this time to recover. So we'll see about next season.
Yeah, for me, I guess like when I started, they didn't really take it too seriously. And they live in the Midwest. I'm from Wisconsin, so they weren't able to really come see me play or come see my team play at all. And then I got a pretty bad concussion my freshman year fall, and I was out for a little bit. and I think my parents like really wanted me to quit after that, and so I kind of told them I quit until they found out after we won nationals like 2 years later. So that was a surprise for them. But yeah, they like haven't like been the most supportive about it. But yeah.
I feel like in general, like my family was supportive. Um, at first, like I did play contact sports growing up, so that already kind of like was a barrier of entry that didn't have to be that they didn't have to get over. But like it was somewhat of a joke at first. Like they didn't think it was like a real sport. But like the more they saw me get into it and the more that I actually cared about it, they're like, okay, like this is something that's sticking around. And like I've been able to get my brother to actually play. He's always been interested in it, but just like never has the time. But like he used to play like linebacker in high school, and it's been nice getting him to play in some like fantasy tournaments. But he's never been able to like truly commit. So overall, been well received. And like with regards to when I first started in college, like my high school friends just it was just a joke. Like it was just like it was never really anything they took seriously. And like while I would like mention it to them or like bring it up to people, like they never really had any interest in actually getting to know it or like really learn more about it. So it was solid plan.
Yeah, for me, my family's been somewhat supportive. They quite don't know what Harry Potter is or don't quite understand it, but they see that I'm happy with the playing the sport, so they support me. Friends, um, yeah, they were pretty rough on me when I first started playing. The fact that I ran around on the broom, they couldn't understand why would I even play a sport to run around on the broom. I think it wasn't until I did the Team USA when my friends actually started to understand that this is a serious sport. But yeah, they were still even nowadays they get on me pretty rough and can't accept it as a real sport.
For me, there's a bit of a mix. Um, obviously there's a bunch of jokes and people made fun of me. I think most people would probably have that experience. My parents, after I started getting into it, were more supportive. My siblings to this day still make fun of me. I know when I first started, there was some apprehension from my parents, not for the physicality reason. I grew up playing sports. I was always getting injured. They were used to that. But Rochester, New York is relatively diverse, I guess, compared to a lot of the United States. But something I haven't been always open about is my background, my heritage. My family's Palestinian. I'm Palestinian. There's not a ton, even in Rochester, outside of my family. And so, even going into college and picking up a sport where I'd be traveling across the country, they were worried about my safety because of our background. And so that was the apprehension. And every time I leave for a tournament, they're still a little nervous. But I mean, the thing that kind of got them behind me was I was lucky to go to college in my hometown. So my captains and a couple of the other leaders on the team came over to my house, met my family, and, kind of built that trust with them. And that made them a little more secure in the travel and meeting other people and all that. But since then, they come out to games whenever they're in Rochester. We've had regionals in the Northeast in Rochester for a while. They would always come out. Summer MLQ series, they'd come out and support. So it's been positive mostly, but there was definitely apprehension in the beginning.
Side note, Bassam's parents are the nicest fans at Rochester games, like at regionals. They're the best.
That's awesome. That's very good to hear. Branching off of this question, I do want to ask, it's such a unique experience being a younger player, or at least person in the Quidditch community, where I get to talk to you guys who've been playing for a while now, 6-7 years. And so how do you think the landscape of Quidditch has changed from when you first started to where we are now, where right now we're able to talk about the issues of race in Quidditch, and how do you think those issues might have changed from when you first started to where we are now?
I would say the most drastic change that I saw was mostly based on athleticism. So when I first started Quidditch, and I was completely non-athletic at all, like a Harry Potter fan, and I felt like, since the Harry Potter fandom has always been really diverse, I think that's what helped us be diverse in the first place. But then once it started getting more physical and more athletic, we lost a lot of people who just didn't want the full contact aspect of it. And, now that we're just recruiting on existing athleticism, and already I feel like, like contact sports in general aren't like necessarily fully diverse versus the population of Harry Potter fans. I think by depotterifying the sport and making it more like geared towards athletes, I feel like that's where we lost a lot of our diversity too.
I feel like there's been like a lot of the fact that we're even talking about it is a huge change. Shows a lot of development because when I first joined, I mean, coming from UCLA, which is supposedly a diverse school in a diverse region, the team didn't really match the diversity. Um, and even going into it, like I really just saw like Quidditch is yeah, it's kind of like a white person sport. Like if like me just seeing it from the outside view, if I wasn't such a Harry Potter fan or didn't have like wasn't as open to it, like it just seemed really weird. Like coming from it from the outside, and also just seeing the type of people playing it, there weren't as many. I feel like people of color really playing, and I think it's just the development has been nice to see that this is something that we're actually consciously thinking about and talking about, so that it's something we can make moves towards. Because I know a big part of Quidditch from the beginning was about it's supposed to be diverse and inclusive, but a lot of the focus has been more on gender and LGBTQ plus inclusion, which is great, and it's definitely something that we should be working on. But we need to be fully intersectional about it and be looking at true diversity and true inclusion for everyone.
Yeah, I agree with Kreger on this one. When I was initially recruited, it was a couple weeks after orientation, so there were still a bunch of freshman students that were interested in Quidditch just because of the novelty of it, but it wasn't really like the people of the team. So I got pulled in by some people I met during orientation, and I showed up to a practice, and I started late. It was like end of September. So the people who had stuck around had kind of settled in, and the people who just tried it out were gone. And I showed up to a practice, and the first thing I kind of noticed was, oh, I am the only person of color. And it was unusual. I come from a predominantly basketball and like track and field background, so was always used to more people of color in those sports. And so it was a little shocking, you know. And I mean, everyone was great. Everyone was super friendly and encouraging and whatnot. And like I said, the leaders of the team took that extra step to come meet my parents and stuff, and that's great. But the initial not seeing a familiar community, is the way I'd put it, was made me a little hesitant to actually commit and join. And it's great that we're talking about this now. I think in my experience, I've always joked about how white the sport is. And people would joke about it too, but it was never taken as like a, hey, maybe we should talk about why that is. And so it's important that we're having this conversation now, 6 years later.
And I guess that's a very good point where just, even though it is 6 years later, it's now definitely a talking point. It's definitely a major issue that a lot of the minority players are bringing up because they don't feel represented in the sport enough. And so this oftentimes makes them hesitant to, like what Bassem was saying. And so I guess the question I'm trying to get into is, how do you think the current teams, such as, and you guys are all part of club teams now, so how do you think club teams should be focusing on their recruitment of players, just outside of the potential, obviously, like college players that will directly feed into the club program, but rather how would you get to recruit people in your communities that you're a part of?
I mean, I think it's just like as simple as like talking to your friends about it, like just being more open about like participating in the sport, right? And like we've seen, I think the thought beforehand was that like, you know, you needed to play college USQ and then like play club to like be good. But we've seen, you know, players go straight to MLQ first before going into club, and like players just go straight into club and not having played college and be good. Like one that comes to mind is like Solomon Gominiak, like when I think he had a season at wideout and then started playing club. So like he completely skipped college, and like he was just recruited by a friend, right? And like now he's a Team USA player. So I think it's just goes to that.
I mean, like on that, like if people join people, like it's going to be hard to come at. It's hard to blindly advertise the sport. Like if you were to just put up a flyer that says Quidditch at this time, there's going to be a huge barrier of entry to people being like, the Harry Potter thing, and they don't have a basis what it is. It's supposed to say any other established sport. Like people will be like, oh, a pickup basketball game or a pickup baseball game. Like those are things that people are used to and that they do. Like a pickup Quidditch game, nobody's ever heard of that really. So you have to really be open, like Ethan said, like you just really have to go after the people that you know. Like it's much easier to get somebody to join when you're close to them. But that beyond that, I think there is some work to be done. There are ways to expand beyond that. Like I know for at least like UCLA Quidditch, they used to do Quidditch parties where they would help. I know, and this is a nationwide thing that people do, where you'll do like a birthday party for like a children's birthday and like show how Quidditch is done. And yes, that reaches those kids, but it also just normalizes it in a sense that like this is a real Quidditch team that's doing this. You're reaching new parents that hear about it that can then tell other people about it. So trying to do more community engagement can also be beneficial as well, while more difficult can help pay off.
Yeah, I'll say I agree that community engagement is a big part of it. I myself, I'm very active within the Georgia and Atlanta community, and that's how I've gotten some people to come out. I will reach out to the local adult leagues, or I would go to different parks, different areas that I knew were very popular, where a lot of people went, and would get a few teammates and go play that way, just trying to get as much exposure as possible. I mean, just recruiting for adults in general is kind of hard, as everybody works and have different schedules. But yeah, I say community engagement and just exposure is like for me the biggest two things that help the most. Is just any type of Harry Potter event, anything, contact, get involved, and go out and just get to know the community and the people.
I agree. I think a lot of club recruitment stems from college, and I think in that we can't really ignore the how do I want to put this? We can't ignore the financial and like opportunities and privileges that many of us have, even players of color, that we have to even be in those situations where we can go to colleges and universities that have Quidditch teams. And, with the country as a whole, that's not an opportunity that everyone has. So like Ethan said, I think and like everyone is saying, I think a lot of it needs to turn into more community engagement, reaching out to people that even just like, I know for example, a lot of the Quidditch players in Rochester do the kickball league every summer. I mean, obviously not now because of COVID, but they do that. And, you know, engaging with people of other teams in that situation, or people who are in, you know, adult basketball leagues or adult other leagues, just reaching out to people in there and kind of, you know, dropping it and getting them curious. I know a lot of people, when they find out or when I tell them about it at work and stuff, they're like super interesting, and I'll recommend that they watch certain videos. I usually point them to our nationals video because they know me and I get a lot of name dropping in that one, so it gets them a little more invested in watching the video. And they come back and they're like, whoa, that's so cool. I didn't realize, like, I thought it was just like some nerdy game when you were talking about it. And definitely in that regard, like, we should be reaching out more into the community and definitely more into urban centers.
I'm glad you brought that up because I do want to ask about that nationals experience where Ethan and Bassam, you guys both led your teams. You both led your team to a national title, which was absolutely amazing. And so, with you guys primarily being the stars of that team, how much credit do you think you got? Primarily Ethan on the coaching level, where do you feel like you got the credit that you deserve? Do you feel like maybe other people got the credit, but I don't know. I don't want to phrase that in a negative light, but it's just, I feel like oftentimes as Quincy brought up in his Facebook post, where he didn't get the credit that he oftentimes felt he deserved because he pretty much built Terminus, and yet oftentimes the Quidditch community is quick to maybe give the credit to someone else. And so I just wanted to ask about your experiences, about how that nationals went, the credit aspect of it, and just your experiences of that.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, I think in Quidditch, it's like really easy to just give credit to like the big names you see. And so, like, I think the three people, like, I mean, there's been just memes about, you know, we had three players on the team, you know, Bassam, Perry, and Steve. And like, yeah, they did like a ton, right? And like Bassam played almost every minute of that game, and like Perry and Steve played almost every minute of that game. Like, outside of them, you know, we had a star-studded group of freshmen, right? Like, I mean, on our starting line, I think we started with 3 freshmen and 2 sophomores, right? And people don't really talk about them. And I guess that's just an issue in Quidditch as a whole. But on the coaching level, I think something that I've noticed is like coaches of color don't really get a lot of credit. And I don't know if that's something that's like intentional or if that's just something that happens. But we see like a lot of coaches get hyped up. And then like you see coaches like Azim, who people don't really talk about much. You know, a lot of people said, oh, like it's just like Augie doing everything, right? When like Azim was a fantastic coach and like he coached Lost Boys this year and like did a great job with them too, right? And so I think there's this narrative out there that like a lot of coaches of credit or coaches of color just don't get as much credit as, you know, coaches that are white. And I think that's just a problem that needs to be fixed.
Yeah. And so from my experience, I obviously got a ton of credit for that. And in my opinion, it's almost hard to not, considering how a lot of that run went, and especially that finals went. But I feel like at the same time, you have to like undoubtedly cement yourself as like a main force to get that credit. And there's definitely validity to some of it. But there's also, you know, in the threads and like post things and, you know, with the MLQ or the 8th man rankings, you know, Rochester didn't even get one after we won. And, you know, there's definitely valid arguments to be said here and there. But I don't know if I see those arguments being brought up across the board, whether it's intentional or not. And then in my experience since, also valid reasons both for the arguments made, but like a lot of my name recognition has kind of fallen off in the past couple of years in the club league. I've heard a lot of, you know, oh, he's a great college player, can't really make it in the club league. And there is validity to some of that, you know, like I haven't had the same success during my club years that I did specifically in that college season. But I think a lot of that ignores a lot of my playing history. I played MLQ whiteout since I was 18 years old. And I handled the club level of MLQ very well. I think in my sophomore or junior season, my second or third year of whiteout, I was like the second or third leading scorer in the entire league. And that goes by pretty unnoticed, you know. And so it's, like I said, there's validity, and I don't think race is like the issue here, but I do feel like there's a lot more both internal pressure and external pressure to maintain the same level or even higher or just to meet higher expectations, if those are expectations that are held. You know, there's just a ton more pressure, I feel like, as a player of color.
Yeah, something that like kind of upsets me when like people have this narrative about Bassam on the club level too is like he won like Division Player of the Year in MLQ, right? Like that's the highest like club level like we have, right? And then people have this like bogus narrative like, oh, like he's a good college player who can't play club, and like he won Division like Club Player of the Year for MLQ, right? Like it's just so stupid. Like it's so frustrating to see.
So I do want to bring in Quincy into this conversation about just the coaching aspect of it, because right now you are the coach of Terminus, and we've seen the rise of Terminus in the last couple of years of how just dominant you guys have been. Can you speak to that dominance, and do you feel like you've gotten the credit for that?
As far as the credit, no, but yeah, no, it's been a lot of work. I agree with both Ethan and Bassam on the point that it is something internal and external that you feel you have to work twice, 3 times as hard as the counterpart. It's a lot of pressure, a lot of stress at times. Yeah, I think a lot of people don't quite understand the work that goes behind the scenes and how much it's not just getting people together, going out there and playing. That this is planned out, discussing with the team, talking with certain people on the team, getting everything set up, and just trying to make sure everything goes smoothly. It's definitely a lot of work, but as far as getting the credit, yeah, we just didn't start getting credit till this year, and even still, we really didn't get credit until we started forcing them to watch our film for matches, and then they actually broke it down and looked like, oh, this team is actually good. It's not just they're just out there, or this team didn't have this player or this player, that we actually have strategy and players who can compete. But yeah, it's definitely, it's pretty tough. It's tiring, especially for my going on 3 years of coaching now. It's been a lot of work. It's definitely been a lot of work.
Branching off of that immediately, what do you think, what would you like to see going into the future? And not just Quincy, but like Ethan as a coach, and everyone else. What do you think needs to be done in maybe in terms of Quidditch media or just in general, where people that are doing as much work as they are should be recognized for it? And so how do you think we should go about doing that?
Well, I think one of the main things is just being more present in like all the different regions, right? Like, I mean, like Terminus doesn't really get much, many views because of the region they play in, because there just like isn't much media attention on that region, right? And like, you know, teams in the Midwest, teams in the Great Lakes, like same thing there. And I think just having a larger presence in those regions really helps with that as well. I also think there's this big issue in Quidditch about people just idolizing players, right? And I think like a lot of people just idolize the same names over and over again. And like even when those like names like aren't as good anymore, right? Like they still get propped up as, you know, the best like in the league or like the best at like what they do. And I think that's a major problem as well.
So yeah, I agree. Yeah, just trying to expose as many players as possible. Just trying to get film. I think film should help. Hopefully, it would help, but maybe either something of highlighting certain players, certain plays, or something during the season or matches. Just getting names out there, because I agree, it's typically the same players over and over that's getting talked about. But there's so many other players that are just as good as those players, and they never get talked about. It's so many people that just play maybe a year and they're great, but again, they probably leave the sport because they never felt like this wasn't for them. They didn't feel special. But yeah, I definitely agree that we should do more in highlighting players in certain regions, because as he said, the West, Midwest, Great Lakes, South, they get there's no credit. There's nothing in these regions.
Yeah.
I feel like a big part.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Krieger.
I just feel like one thing that we can really do moving forward is just really like outreach. Like if you're going to be a person doing media, if you're going to be somebody that wants to start a podcast or like anything like that, like reach out to more people. Like you have a list of every team. You can contact any team you want. Like whether you may know somebody on that team very well or not is different, but you can at least get some perspectives. And it's the onus is really on you, because it's going to be hard for someone who already feels like they don't get a lot of representation or don't feel comfortable to try to put themselves out there, or like try to like shake things up. But if you're somebody that's creating something and has that position of power, like you can reach out to these regions, you can reach out to these teams like, hey, I haven't heard much about this team, let me like talk to them to see their perspective. Like obviously, like y'all have said, film is very important, and like if we can get more quality film in Quidditch in general, it would help all regions. But I think a lot of it sometimes is also just like outreach. People get, like you said, people idolize certain players or certain people so much that those are the go-to. People will continue going to them and hearing their perspective and like focusing on their story, but there's so many other stories to be told.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, go ahead.
To piggyback off Quincy and Krieger, I do think more of a spotlight, like a player spotlight, is definitely necessary. Like Quincy said, there's lots of players who, are extremely talented, and after a year or two, they're making waves on their teams, and people in their region might know how great they are, but they don't get that attention. And I mean, it's something I went through in my first couple of years, where I felt that I became a major player on my team, and then was starting to get a little bit of recognition, but and I'm not to say like that I haven't gotten recognition. I very much have, but I know that there's many other people who haven't, and it's hard to stay committed and passionate about something where you're working so hard and it doesn't seem like your efforts are yielding fruit. And so I do think our media sources could do a better job, but at the same time, I think a lot of that should also fall on our governing bodies, right? Like when we look at our professional sports, they highlight their players. I mean, it's a little thing, but like the NBA will shout out to a player's birthday, like I'm not saying we can get that in detail. We don't have the same kind of funds or anything, but MLQ seems to have some of the infrastructure in place where they have media coordinators and stuff like that, and like specific hired volunteers for the teams, where they can put out little spotlights on everyone on that team. I don't think USQ is doing as good of a job in that sense, and I know they're covering a lot more teams and a lot more players, but we do have regions, if they need to recruit more volunteers and such, like maybe that's something they should look into, because while it's great for our media, our current like private, media outlets to do that, I think there needs to be more, our governing bodies require more accountability in this, besides, just the census or some surveys or like, hey, what's going on? Like they should actively be doing more, in my opinion.
Well, I'm glad you say that, because it's been, as someone who's worked closely with USQ and just been talking, I'm very close with friends with Christian Barnes. And so it's just like, he tells me how understaffed USQ is for the most part, where like volunteers, it's super hard to get people to volunteer in the first place. And then even those people that do volunteer, they might not show up for their shifts during regional tournaments or like national tournaments. And so like, I definitely agree with you. The onus is definitely on the league and like the overall board, but how would you guys go about maybe emphasizing the fact that we do need more volunteers, and maybe if we do get more players of color volunteering, that would help embolden other people to volunteer? How do you guys see that going about, and what do you think USQ or like just teams should be doing to help the players of color on their team to feel comfortable enough to volunteer?
You hit it right on the nail, because I think I was going to bring up lack of volunteers next, because I've been in the Quidditch community since 2012, so I've seen like when Eighth Man wasn't like there was like Quidditch pros and there was other ones, and there was like a dedicated U.S. marketing team that was churning out like articles at World Cups. And the biggest thing I think right now is the reason is the lack of volunteers. And I feel like, I mean, my personal opinion is I also feel like, you know, the fact that we've de-Potterified the sport over time has, like, we've lost a lot of those volunteers, just comparing our, like, initial World Cups to the sport now, where we're struggling for volunteers, like non-playing Quidditch fans, essentially, that would, you know, follow the sport and write articles on it. But then in the current Quidditch climate, I would say that I think, you know, it would be cool to see like individual coaches that see their players not recognized actually write up a draft of the article and maybe submit it, because I really think it's a matter of the lack of resources to even put those articles together, to even have the time to like reach out to everyone, because every organization is so short staffed, and they're also, and the people who are manning those organizations are also like manning other Quidditch organizations as well.
Yeah, I agree. There's definitely, like, I think leaders on teams, and something I see that's come out of the like the new version of conferences and Quidditch conferences is a lot more representation. Like MQC is doing a great job. Others are doing a great job as well, and that's great. But at the same time, it's hard. I feel like it's hard for a lot of players to get involved. You know, like it's hard to take that leadership role, especially now that like coaching is becoming a much bigger position. You have lots of veteran players who are either coaching their club teams or coaching college teams, whether it's their alma mater or just a club team or a college team in the region that they've moved to. And so now you have this split, because I feel like our volunteers have generally been very veteran players, you know, who maybe are not playing anymore, or maybe are, but aren't in a leadership role anymore. But a lot of those same players, veteran players, or newer veteran players, are looking more to teach the youth of the sport, so to speak, or like, you know, get more involved with the college players as opposed to the organizations themselves. And I don't know, I personally don't know why that is. I've seen a ton of volunteers that work for USQ and MLQ do outstanding jobs. But I don't know if there's just like a lack of incentive, or if there's just kind of, I mean, personally, there's like a financial burden there. Like I can't ref, I can't commit to certain things because I don't know if I have the finances to do that. I'm already dropping a bunch of cash just to play in the sport, you know? So I don't know what systemic things we can tackle. I'm not that close with the USQ organization. I don't know what kind of systemic issues we can tackle to reinvigorate our volunteer force. So
It's also like it's hard to volunteer for an organization if you don't feel like they're doing anything for you specifically, right? And so I think with like people of color in particular, like USQ and MLQ have really dropped the ball, right? And so it's like hard to like, get people of color volunteering in those organizations if they don't feel like the organizations value them.
I think it's also hard when the population or like the representation is so low that when you do take a position like that, you become sort of the face of people of color or your specific race, you know, whether that be. And I know that's a tough thing to deal with. I've grown up all my life being told by my parents, hey, you represent our entire people, make sure you don't mess up, you know. And I'm sure many other people, persons of color, have had similar rhetoric. And so when you become such a face in the community, any action you make just becomes, you're worried that it's representative of your whole group, whether or not that's true.
That's a very excellent point. That leads me into my next question, where what ways do you think non-players of color or people of color can highlight and prop up their BIPOC teammates without falling into tokenism? Because quite honestly, what you've just described is where one person's trying to represent everything, or like one team or a team's like, oh yeah, we have like one black player on our team or one brown player on our team, or we have like it's just like one of those things where you don't want tokenistic approaches to things. So how do you think we should go about generating, I guess, a culture of where people are genuinely treated the way they should be treated? I guess I think that's the easiest way to put it.
I think before you even go into like the public facing part of it, you have to make sure that you generate a culture that is very accepting and really cares. Like regardless of whether a person of color might be a leadership position or not, like are you listening to them? Like are you really like consulting them or consulting the different type of people on your team before you make a big decision? Like because regardless of like say they're not in a leadership role and that this person or this ally might have the ultimate say, you still want to make sure you're getting input from everyone. You want to make sure you really understand these different viewpoints so that you can see how things are. And that if a person of color does choose to take a position, you let them do it to their terms. You're not trying to like you said, just really push it. You have to let them be comfortable taking the lead where they want to take the lead.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'm in agreement with Kreger. I don't think it has to be this formal, like, hey, you know what I mean? I think Ethan wrote a post about how I was a big reason why he stayed in the sport. And I mean, obviously I paid attention to it because we're both players of color and I wanted him to stick around. And there was that minimal representation now that I had become a leader, but I never went up to him in a way that, like, hey, we got to stick together, like I just informally devoted some extra attention to him as a player. And I know that like informally the leaders, when I joined, dedicated some attention to me. They came to my parents' house, like, who does that? That's a unique position in my opinion. But like there are things where I think non POC players and leaders can give extra attention, not special treatment, but really make players of color, especially at the college level, like incoming freshmen who are already out of their comfort zone, really making sure they feel welcome and feel safe in that community. And so I think that's the most important part in the initial recruitment and retention part of it. Obviously, we've talked about some of the things later on with retention, but I think initially you just have to make that connection and that bond and establish that sense of trust and familiarity. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a formal thing. I think if you're a non-POC leader, like let's say you're the coach or captain of your team and you have some POC players, talking to them first before a recruitment event, instead of, at the recruitment event, hey, can you like take this leadership role right now, and like put them on the spot, because that's a tough thing to do, and not everyone's comfortable doing that regardless of their racial background. Not everyone's comfortable just being in a lead position, especially on the spot. So, really getting to know your teammates well enough and knowing what they're comfortable with and helping them make positive changes on your team and in recruitment and retention and other things.
I do want to go into, I guess, the Quidditch is such a male-dominated sport for the most part, and so Izzy, I know we just talked about how we don't want one person trying to represent everyone, I guess, but like with your opinion, I guess, based on like what you've experienced, what do you think Quidditch has done well in getting like female gender non-conforming players into the sport, and what do you think that they haven't done well in regards to maybe getting more like Asian American athletes, or just overall, I guess, more representation in terms of the minority players when it comes to like gender?
Yeah, totally. I can definitely speak about that, just having been in Quidditch for so long. And there's some trends that, you know, like I can tell. I'm just gonna tell the story because it's really awesome for me to actually tell it on like this platform. But I was on the Rogues, and it was Turtle Cup, and so I got to back up a few, but um everybody knows, whoever plays with me on a team, that I love Brooms Up. I literally sprint to work like the distance of Brooms Up just to prepare for Brooms Up. I love Brooms Up. And and so when we did Brooms Up drills at the beginning of the season for Rogues to see like who's the fastest, out of the people there, I was the fastest. And so when it came to like a game time at Turtle Cup, um, I was annoyed that like, you know, um, they kept picking like white men to go for the ball when I already proved that I was already faster. And not only that, like in one of the games, it was like someone that wasn't even practicing with our team yet. It was someone new, and they automatically get that spot no matter what. You know, they have like males just have that like the extra pass. They don't have to earn for that spot. They just get it. You know, and then finally, my teammate Jen, who's white and female, like we were okay. Yeah, I was on the Rogues, which is the B team of the Warriors, and we were actually going up against the A team, the Warriors. And again, they were picking a white male to go for Brooms Up that I beat in practice, and so Jen advocated for me to go for Brooms Up. And I remember my coach like looking at me saying, "Can you guarantee you can get the ball?" And I just said yes, even though I was like terrified because I'm going up against the Warriors, with Sean going for the ball. But I actually beat him to get the quaffle on Brooms Up. And honestly, that was like, I can't even like express how much I like getting that support of a fellow teammate advocating for you, is huge. And plus also proving to everyone that I have the talent, I have the capabilities to get the ball on Brooms Up. And it was huge. Now unfortunately, like the next practice time, the Warriors coach talked to us about how you're not supposed to question coaches decisions at all. But and so since then, I never made a fuss or anything like that. But it was just like one of those moments, defining moments in my Quidditch career where I realized like, like in terms of what can we do, we can just advocate for our teammates. When we see something, yeah, like, if you realize you're getting a lot more playtime than someone else, then, advocate for them as well.
Izzy, that was very powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I guess that brings up a lot of interesting questions where, again, I'm going to go back to Quincy and Ethan, but everyone else feel free to hop in, where you guys are coaches of your teams actively right now. And so when you hear that a coach, or coaches, I'm sorry, not captains. But when you hear that, like, a coach goes up to their teammate or their player and says, hey, you need to unconditionally listen to your coach, like how do you react to that? And then for your own teams, how do you set the culture of your leadership as coaches? And so that's for the coaches, I guess. And like for everyone else who are not coaches, how do you want your coaches to interact with you? And I'll just leave it up to that, I guess.
I guess I'll go. Yeah, so like that's definitely like not my coaching style. I think that like that coaching style, like it works in the sense that like you get like a well-oiled machine of like everyone knows like what they're supposed to be doing, but I think you lose out on like opportunities, like Isabella said, right? Like you lose out on the opportunity to like see like a player, like a female player, like normally like wouldn't be going for Brooms Up, but going for Brooms Up and winning, right? Like you lose opportunities like that, right? So I do think there's like a big trade-off there. I think like I've like to think that I've been pretty good at like getting my players' opinions. Like after games, like I think my players have gotten to the point of being annoyed at me at how much I ask them like what we could have done right and what we could have done wrong. Bassam knows I did this all the time on Rochester. I do this all the time on Heat too, because we just like have so many experienced players. So you should just like go up to them, see like, oh, like what do you think we do right? What do you think we do wrong? And I feel like that's a really good way to like learn from every game, because I think like even in like a stop, like you should still be learning something from a game, right? Like there isn't a game that you should go into and feel like, wow, I learned absolutely nothing from that game, right? And I think like treating your players that way, or like having a team culture like that, really helps in doing that.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, even for me, for coaching, it's kind of rough to hear that you shouldn't question a coach. I mean, because even coaches make mistakes. That's that happens. But for me, if a player proves that they can perform at that level, give them a chance. There's no reason to have people on the team and they don't get to play. That's for me. That kills me. I push the issue of making sure everyone gets in a rotation. This last season, we had two players who never. This was their first year playing Quidditch, and they were playing at a club level, and even they got in almost every game. Oktoberfest, they played every game. I at least give them 3 good shifts because your team is only as good as your weakest player. And I know I can't speak for every team, but a lot of teams will only have maybe 12, 13 people that they go through. But I push that, hey, everybody should be able to play at any moment in time. Even after games, kind of like as Ethan does, I go speak with my players. How do they feel? What do they think they can do better? How you feel about rotations? Are rotations doing good? I, we have kind of separate groups. We have our chaser group and beater group, and they kind of split off and go into their own individual groups and discuss things. I try to make sure that I go in between both so I can get an understanding of what's going on. But yeah, I think it's making each player feel special, feel like they matter, and that they have a point of view. And it's like they should not feel like they should be able to speak up, especially for the girls, because I know at times the girls are less likely to speak up. But I definitely tell them that, hey, speak up to me if it's something wrong, anything, let me know. I do what I can to make sure that you feel comfortable. And yeah, that's most of what I push for.
It feels
just
like
wanna-
women have to it feels like women have to always prove themselves in order to get those opportunities, whether it's to be like, in the middle line throwing the ball, whatever. We tend to like be relegated to wing chaser, and we have to earn that position to be the quaffle carrier, whereas like new males that join the team can automatically go into the middle line, and it's just like it feels like a double standard, honestly.
It 100% is. You said it in your story, and I don't think we actively mentioned it, but you said that your coach had asked you if you if you could guarantee that you would get the ball, and I don't think I've ever heard any coach ask that of a male player ever. Maybe in like a very critical game, but like pretty much never. No one's perfect, but that's not okay. And like Quincy and Ethan were saying, shout out to Bosnia. Obviously not perfect, but Bosnia's built this culture, and that's why I keep going back, even though I can't. Not that they practice, but not that I can't practice. I'm in Rochester, and Bosnia is primarily, or has generally been primarily Boston and New York. But the reason I go back is, even on the sideline mid-game, whoever's in charge, and leadership's changed a couple times, I believe, and whoever's in charge is just like encouraging people to, once they come off the shift, tell leadership or other players, hey, I noticed this, maybe we should try this. And there's always a conversation on sidelines, in timeouts, after games, about what adjustments we can make to certain teams and certain players. And that, I think, is important. Obviously, Bosnia's not perfect, and I'm sure there are voices that don't feel heard, but the fact that there's even the extent to that, which it is open like that, is great. And obviously, I'd like to keep seeing it progress, and I'm hoping more teams kind of adopt that. I don't believe anyone in Quidditch is an expert enough where they shouldn't be told what's going to happen. The game's still so new and changing relatively quickly year to year, and no one like the difference between a 6-year player and a 4-year player, or a 4-year player and an 8-year player, really isn't going to make or break anyone. And that input is always important to hear, I think, no matter who you are and how long you've been playing the sport. So.
I think with regards to like playing on like a culture and like how to make sure like your leadership is doing things correctly, is a big part of just being transparent and on the same page as your team. I've played on teams where there's more of a focus of like, hey, you might not ever get playing time. Like the first time I joined Gambits, I was coming off, it was my 3rd year ever playing, and they were like one of the best team in the region at the time. Like they were winning regionals regularly. Like they were a dominant force. And straight up, I remember Steve messaging me, being like, "Hey, like we'll accept you. Like we accept anyone onto the team, but know that you're not guaranteed any play time at all whatsoever." And I went into it knowing that that's how it was. And I've played on other teams where the focus is like, okay, we'll get more reps. And I think the key to make sure those teams work is that everybody's on the same page, that they know that that's what they're getting into. Like that first year on Gambits, I may have not played, I barely played during the season, but that is the season where I feel like I developed the most by just practicing with them, being able to practice with these great players. And to me, that was well worth it. Like I would gladly take that experience and getting better over playtime that year. And so like that, I think that's just a crucial part of it. I think there's pros and cons to both types of teams, or a mix. But it's just making sure everybody understands that, so that there's less friction, and that they know that going forward. And like that might play a thing in retention as well. Like you might have the teams that focus on getting people more playtime. It does seem like you might end up having more retention. Gambits had a pretty regularly rotating roster for a lot of their years. There was the core, but then like if you would notice each year there would be like new names on the game, like almost like half the roster would be new names. It wasn't until I think their later years where like the UCLA graduate, like the UCLA contingent that we were able to bring over to Gambits, led to like a little more consistency, and led to them really helped out actually. But yeah, I just think it's really good to be on the same page.
Yeah, I think Krieger really hit the nail on the head there. Like, if you're going to have a team where, like, some people just might not play, you've just got to be honest with people, right? And like, you got to tell them that, like, you can't get someone's hopes up, and then like they come to this tournament all excited to play, and then like they don't get a chance, because that's just super shitty, right? And I think like on Rochester, like we had this talk with freshmen all the time that we were like, look, like we have a chance to win a title here, right? We are going to shorten lineups, right? Especially day 2 of big tournaments. We are going to shorten lineups. And, you know, sometimes people are upset by that, right? Like after games, like people would be upset by that. But, you know, you've got to be available for those people to talk to you, for those people to vent, right? Like I've had like multiple players like on that team, like even on Heat, like vent about playtime, right? And that's like completely okay, right? And like if like you don't make yourself available to those players, I think that's when things like start being a problem, right? If like someone like wants to like or is upset about playtime, or someone's like upset about how the team's running, and like you don't make yourself available to that person, that's I don't think is like acceptable.
I completely agree, and I'll share one more story. It was nationals playing for the Rogues, and during the whole entire season, during practices, we did double female chaser, which was just because we had enough more girls, and then when we come to nationals, I felt like we should be best prepared, like for the double female chaser lineups, because that's what we practiced the entire season. But then the Rogues picked up 2 like white men that have like been out of the Quidditch circle for a little bit, and you know what happens when people try to like recruit people just for nationals, and what pisses me off is that like they got first dibs onto playing time. Like, we did not run a double female chaser lineup, so us girls got less play time, and then also like they didn't practice the entire season, so they were bad, like, but that's not their fault. I mean, they didn't practice the entire season. They didn't build team chemistry, and it just felt like a slap in the face because I was still living in Philadelphia, and I like bused to New York or carpooled to New York and every Saturday just to get this experience to play for the B team of the Warriors, and it just felt like this. That was just like the cherry on top with my experience that season.
I mean, there's not going to be a great way to follow up that story because obviously that's just such an infuriating experience. I'm super sorry that you had to go through that, Izzy. So I guess that's a perfect way to, I guess, go into it is what does progress look like for you guys? We are short on time, so this will be the last question. So I guess in the next maybe year or so, we're having this whole conversation right now, but this is because we're all stuck at home. When we do start playing again, what do you guys want to see change in the Quidditch community, and how does that look like?
One thing I want to see is, I feel like the community discourse is really dominated by just a few people, and like that's super problematic. And like I've been responsible for like part of that as well, right? Like I'm one of the voices who like has been like semi-dominant in like what I've been saying, right? So that's definitely something for me to work on, for others to work on. And I think like people don't also understand like that what they say affects the opinions of others as well. And so like when like those people like neglect certain people in the community or like certain regions in the community, then like those regions get looked down on, or like those like people get looked down on by like the community as a whole, right? And that's just super shitty. And that's like something that's bothered me, and it's something that like definitely needs to change.
I think the main thing for me is going to be the player spotlights that we mentioned earlier. I think that's super important for new players and, like breakout stars and stuff like that. I don't see any reason why that shouldn't happen. I don't think there's any like valid argument for why that's not possible. Obviously there's a lot more time right now, but I mean, how many tournaments do teams really go to during a year? Not that many. I'm sure teams and media sources and the governing bodies can dedicate a couple of hours a week to, highlighting a couple players. Like if I was a team coach or team captain or a volunteer for USQ or an MLQ volunteer for a specific team, I know it's hard work, doing the graphics and stuff, not to, shit on art designers and graphic designers and stuff like that. And that's definitely not been respected in our community enough. But, if there's some kind of leadership building and, making that spotlight happen, I don't think that's too much to ask on top of, just regular responsibilities.
I think for me, progress will just be seeing reflections on teams. We're doing a lot of talk and just seeing how teams and leadership picks up on it, and partially being that change, working on pushing for more leadership to be inclusive and to really respect the people around them, and hopefully noticing that change throughout the team environments. And also, at least in the West, I'm hoping to push for more like club college involvement. Like, it's wild to me to think that there's no West college team that's really ever, not for a while at least, in my knowledge, had like a dedicated coach that wasn't playing for them. Like, I hear about it so much in different areas, but I think the last time that happened for UCLA was when they got second place. They had like Mitch Cavender was their coach back then. But as long as I was on UCLA, there was never like an outside community member or club member like helping with the team. It was always just kind of like figure it out each year. And I think it really helps to have that club to college involvement, but especially having the leadership that is doing that to come in and focus on those spots that have been missed so much. To really push an environment of like, you know, these people matter. We have to put work and effort into each person and not just being like, oh, there's that athletic person. I just want to focus on them because it'll be easier. But like Quincy said before, like you got to build up the entire team. You got to build up everyone. And you got to make sure you focus on all those people, especially in college, to make them feel seen, to make them feel welcome. So, because they're the future of the sport. You know, if we can't get new young people, it's hard. It'll be hard to build. And it'll be hard to grow.
I think for me, it's like for coaches to really be self-aware in their decisions and seeing how their team plays. Our minority groups getting some ball time, even if they're on the lineups. You know, I heard of a team that actually attempted to do like passing to girls, passing to women, quaffle drills. But even then, the men still like didn't take it seriously and didn't even pass at all. And I feel like that just goes to highlight the, like, you know, the overall disrespect of minorities, you know. And I feel like now I think it's the perfect time to just really reflect and take those into considerations, and making sure that you know the ball time is actually equitable, because otherwise, you know, only the good people are going to get better. And you know, if we're really trying to diversify the sport, we need to work on player development of minorities as well.
Yeah, I'll say, yeah, the leadership stepping up, not just captains or coaches of teams, but also our governing bodies stepping up and just doing more. I kind of like what's going on with MQC. I know the South itself is trying to push their own conference, and I know the Southwest as well is doing it, and I know West Coast has always kind of had their own thing to their conference. But I believe those conferences will help not only to promote more for the college, and it can help promote club as well. It's just getting all the coaches come together to figure out a way to help grow players in the region, grow teams, just to keep the sport active, keep it growing, keep challenging players, keep just doing different things, just keeping everybody in it. I think that's a big part about it. Is players like to feel rewarded. If you feel like, oh, I go do this and I'm gonna achieve this at the end of the season, that gives them more to work towards. But just coming together as a group and just helping everything grow more. That's what I'm looking forward to seeing too.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Sorry, before we close, I think there's just one thing I kind of want to stress and reiterate. Opening up those opportunities for POCs to be leaders is important, but I think non-POC and non-dominant gender representation, like not you know, female and gender non-conforming groups, opening up those opportunities for them is important, but at the same time, we can't, as a community, expect them to do all the work in progressing our community. You know, our non-POC players, our male players really need to take that step and do the work to improve their own individual efforts and the efforts of that dominating community as well. It's not going to happen without their active efforts and responsibility.
Awesome. Thank you so much for saying that. That's super important. And yeah, I think that's a great way to end this roundtable tonight. Thank you guys all so much for coming on tonight, for sharing your stories, and just for being available for being able to talk about this, which I know isn't easy on this platform. Thank you all.
Thank you for giving us a
for having
platform.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.